Welcome to Fantastic Vision. Please subscribe us before you watch today's video. The United States has recently made a big move, saying that it will take out $25 billion to develop its own semiconductor industry. On the surface, it seems to be revitalizing local manufacturing, but everyone knows that this is clearly aimed at China. The United States is shouting, reducing dependence on China, but the problem is that the global semiconductor industry chain has long been intertwined, and even if it wants to decouple, it is not something that can be solved with a few banknotes. What's more, China's progress in the chip field in recent years is not exaggerated. Foreign-funded enterprises occupy 55% of the market share in China, which is not something that the United States can take back with a "I want independence." Let's talk about the background first. The global chip industry has been changing in recent years. What is a chip? In layman's terms, it is the brain of various electronic devices. Without it, mobile phones, computers and even cars will have to stop working. The global semiconductor market size has soared to $500 billion in 2023. Everyone wants to have a bite of this cake. The United States has always been the big brother in the chip industry, but in recent years it has found that its dominant position has begun to waver. In particular, China, relying on heavy investment and policy support, has been pressing ahead with chip technology and has already occupied 25% of the global market share. This has made the United States panic, especially in key chip fields such as IGBT, where the foreign capital control rate in the Chinese market is as high as 55%, and the proportion of independent research and development by local companies is also increasing year by year. Therefore, the United States can no longer sit still and decided to take out $25 billion using tax incentives and research and development funding as a means to pull the local chip industry back to the golden age. But the question is, will this money really work? The matter is actually very simple. The United States has found that its dominant position in the chip field is not as good as before. In the past, the United States has always been proud of having the world's top chip design companies, such as Intel and Nvidia. But design is design, and chip manufacturing mainly depends on Asia, such as TSMC in Taiwan and Samsung in South Korea. At the same time, the rise of China has made the United States even more uneasy. Since 2018, the Chinese government has increased its support for the semiconductor industry, especially local companies such as SMIC and Huawei HiSilicon, which have made major breakthroughs in manufacturing and design. In 2022, SMIC announced the mass production of 14 nanometers process technology, which ranks 6th in the world. In terms of market share, China's chip output value has reached $140 billion, of which 60% are produced by local companies. Seeing this, the United States can't sit still and feels that it must take some measures, otherwise the dominant position of the chip industry will be lost sooner or later. So, the United States announced a big plan in 2024 and decided to allocate $25 billion to support the local semiconductor manufacturing industry. The use of this money mainly includes two parts. One is to reduce taxes for chip companies, and the other is to provide research and development funding subsidies. On the surface, this plan is ambitious, but in fact, this move by the United States is also full of contradictions and challenges. First of all, the global supply chain makes it impossible for the United States to completely get rid of its dependence on external markets. For example, more than 50% of the high-purity silicon materials required for chip manufacturing come from China and Russia. If the United States wants to desynergize, it must first solve the problem of raw materials, otherwise its own production capacity is likely to be affected. Secondly, the cost of chip manufacturing in the United States is too high. Take TSMC as an example. This company not only has the most advanced technology, but also can minimize production costs through a global layout. In 2022, TSMC's revenue reached $56 billion, net profit exceeded $20 billion, and market share was as high as 70%. In contrast, American manufacturing companies not only have high costs, but also lag behind in technology. Finally, the technological advantages accumulated by China over the years are not easily surpassed by $25 billion. From SMIC to Huawei HiSilicon, Chinese companies are investing more and more in technology research and development, and their production capacity is gradually improving. It is probably not so easy for the United States to change the global semiconductor landscape with a sum of money. Let's take a closer look at the feasibility of the US $25 billion plan. From the complexity of the global supply chain, the semiconductor industry has long been not something that any country can fight alone. The production of chips involves thousands of processes, from design to manufacturing, and each link requires highly specialized equipment and raw materials. Take silicon materials as an example. According to data from the International Energy Agency, 30% of the world's silicon supply in 2023 depends on China and Russia. If the United States forcibly decouples, it may not even be able to make cores. Back to the manufacturing process, the United States' technological disadvantages are equally obvious. Although Intel and Nvidia are still leading in chip design, they are far behind TSMC and Samsung in the manufacturing field. TSMC has now achieved mass production of 3 nanometers process, while the US manufacturing process is still at a coarser process node. More importantly, TSMC's production bases in mainland China and Taiwan are not only efficient, but also lower in cost. In contrast, the United States has high labor costs, strict environmental protection requirements, and aging infrastructure, and it is simply unable to compete with Asia. At the same time, China's catching up speed makes the United States more anxious. In the past few years, China's semiconductor companies have gradually narrowed the gap with international giants through government support and technical research. In 2022, SMIC's annual output value exceeded $10 billion, and Huawei HiSilicon has also made a lot of progress in independent chip research and development. Although China still has shortcomings in the field of high-end chips, such as the market share of IGBT chips is mainly controlled by foreign companies, but overall, China's chip industry is no longer what it was 10 years ago. Therefore, the US $25 billion plan seems to be aggressive, but whether it can really work is still a big question mark. In the end, this chip competition may not see a big reversal because of the US $25 billion. In the context of globalization, competition and cooperation in the semiconductor industry have become inseparable. The United States wants to get rid of its dependence on China through self-sufficiency, which not only faces huge technical and cost challenges, but may also lead to further tension in the global supply chain. As for China, although it still has shortcomings, it has occupied an important position in the global semiconductor market, with continuous investment and technological breakthroughs. So the question is, can the US $25 billion really change the global semiconductor landscape? China's rise in the chip field is the result of decades of accumulation. Can the United States catch up with this little money? Global cooperation is the key to solving the problem. Those who work behind closed doors can only put themselves in greater trouble. Is the US plan ambitious or self-deception? In the future, it is worth waiting to see who will win in this chip game.